across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello and a very good evening to you. This is Petrie here with you on Talk for the next couple of hours. Just to tell you what's coming up, we're being joined by the fabulous John Boothman, political correspondent at the Sunday Times in Scotland at midnight. John, fresh from having been at the Tory party conference, is now at the SNP conference. One of the reasons I didn't want to be a political correspondent, I think, perhaps, is all the conferences. But anyway, John is joining us live from there. Also joining us is James Worley. He's going to be talking to us about the new EU EES rules. Those are the new visa rules, which I find really complicated. They're saying you have to allow 4 hours to go through this process for the first time. So we'll get the latest on that from James. Van Connor, our film critic, is also joining us, so we'll be chatting to him. And hopefully we'll have time to talk about Diane Keaton, who I loved. And she died over the weekend. But before that, and it is good news, of course, it is good news. It is the peace deal that has now been signed regarding Israel and the Palestinian people, Hamas particularly. The last 20 living hostages have now been returned to their loved ones. And Israel released almost 2,000 Palestinians, none of whom were involved in the atrocious October the 7th attack. But nonetheless, it is 2,000 that have been released. US President Donald Trump flew over to Israel and addressed Parliament in a long praise hailing today, a tremendous day, a new era of harmony for the Middle East. He got 22 standing ovations. Trump then went on to meet 20 world leaders in Egypt to sign a peace document to cement his Gaza ceasefire deal. The document, signed also by the Egyptian president as well as the heads of state from Turkey and the Qatari emir, is also meant to lay the groundwork for Gaza's future. However, its content has not been made public, and many people will say that although this has been really, really difficult to get to this point, this was the easy part of it. What happens next? Can it hold? Will it hold? And is Donald Trump really certain that this is going to be the peace that he believes it to be? Let's listen to him now. Donald Trump talking about the painful nightmare being over for Israelis and Palestinians.
Now at last, not only for Israelis, but also for Palestinians and for many others, the long and painful nightmare is finally over. And as the dust settles, the smoke fades, the debris is removed, and the ashes cleaned from the air, the day that breaks on a region transformed and a beautiful and much brighter future appears suddenly within your reach. This is now a very exciting time for Israel and for the entire Middle East, because all across the Middle East, the forces of chaos, terror, and ruin that have plagued the region for decades now stand weakened, isolated, and totally defeated.
President Donald Trump there addressing the Israeli MPs. Scott Lucas joins me now, Professor of International Politics and founder and editor of EA World View. Scott, I just thought it was worth playing that clip of Donald Trump, who of course is being extremely positive about this, but is he also potentially being a little naive?
He's on a victory lap, Petrie. I just want to start from that. We can get into the details of what has been achieved so far. And you actually took my line about the hard part actually starting now. In fact, let me start before we talk about Trump. Look, let's celebrate what was achieved today, that 20 Israeli hostages have survived more than 2 years in Hamas captivity. They're reunited with families and friends tonight. We have had 4 of 28 bodies of those hostages who did not survive that have been returned. We hope we get more so those families can get closure. We've had almost 2,000 Palestinian detainees who have been reunited with friends and families. So you'll see some of the clips now showing this, and that's a very positive thing. But what happened today, Petrie, was not an advance to get us to a peace deal. There's not a peace deal. I have to emphasize there isn't, because you have a ceasefire, which thank goodness stops the mass killing for now. But a peace deal requires lasting arrangements for security, for governance. And the reason why I'm being very cautious today is that Donald Trump was not there to advance that next stage, both in appearing before the Knesset and then in effectively hijacking. And I explained how he can hijack an international meeting in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt. He was there to praise himself. He was there. Now, you all were very kind to him in those clips. You picked out, I think, a couple of the important clips that had been written for him. But for example, when he appeared before the Knesset, his chief emphasis was, I'm the man who stopped 8 wars. I've stopped 8 wars and I'll stop more. And then he spent a lot of the speech trashing people he doesn't like. A lot of the speech was about Joe Biden, Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, how they were awful. And there was even a part in the speech where he intervened, some would say interfered, in Israel's politics and the law to call for Benjamin Netanyahu to be pardoned on bribery charges.
Yeah, I did think that.
That's Trump being Trump. And when he went to Sharm el-Sheikh, and if you look at the photographs down there, he got each of the leaders, national leaders, to come up, shake his hand, say hello, say how wonderful he was, like he does with his cabinet when he's back in Washington. This was him. This is Trump's ego playing out. Now, the important thing is, if that ego happens to get us in advance, that's a good thing, right? But here's the issue. First of all, Donald Trump didn't lead the process to get us to this point. He supported Israel all the way up to September 9th in those mass killings in Gaza. It was actually the Gulf states that turned him because Israel attacked Qatar, an American ally, with the largest U.S. base in the Middle East. That was actually the significant catalyst. Okay, Trump then takes credit, but this sketch, it's not a plan, this sketch. Let's just tick off the issues very quickly that we could talk about. One, okay, Israeli troops have pulled back. They now occupy 53% of Gaza. What is the timing and the extent of the further Israeli withdrawal? Will they remain in Gaza? Which parts of Gaza will they remain in? What will be the terms that are established for that? Secondly, what about the disarmament of Hamas? What is the timing of that? What is the extent of that? Can Hamas retain defensive arms? No arms whatsoever. Thirdly, what are the arrangements for the governance and security of Gaza? And that is, we have the international board and Trump's chairman of the board. There are no Palestinians on that. The day-to-day administration, we're told, will have Palestinians, but of course it will not include Hamas, quite rightly. The Israelis say it will not include the Palestinian Authority. But who are the Palestinian technocrats? Who are the Palestinian civil society activists that might be on that? Will Israel have a veto over them? What about the International Stabilization Force that's supposed to provide security? Who's going to provide troops? Will Palestinians be involved in that force? Will Israel have a veto over that force? And then, if you're going to get lasting security, you might as well say it, we have to have arrangements for a 2-state resolution, which means a state of Palestine. But who are the 2 biggest obstacles to a state of Palestine right now? Benjamin Netanyahu and Donald Trump.
It's interesting when you talk about Benjamin Netanyahu, because they play this big game, he and Trump, about being buddies, BB, Donny, all of that. But actually, when you talk about that change in attitude from Donald Trump and quite rightly pinpoint that moment, Donald Trump realised, and he even hinted on it today in his speech, that Israel was becoming incredibly unpopular around the world. And he was joking about it, but he was saying, you did some really bad things, and you weren't very liked, and there were a lot of people turning against you. And that's when Donald Trump turned. It's almost like he thought he was backing a winner with Israel. But as soon as he saw the global, the money and the Middle East and the rest of the world start to say, this is wrong, this is just going really wrong, that's when Trump changed horses, if you like.
No, it's not the globe, Petrie. It's the Gulf states. Yeah. Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar. Let me explain. Look, Trump's folks today were spinning. That they were saying some pretty naughty things about Keir Starmer in the UK because the UK has recognized the state of Palestine. They've said some naughty things about France. Where they were concerned was the Gulf state. Let me flash you back very quickly because it's an important subject. Trump only really broke from supporting the Israelis between the start of March, when Israel resumed military operations after a 6-week ceasefire, and when they cut off almost all aid. He only really broke with them briefly when he said he didn't want to see starving children, right? He said that just after he was in Saudi Arabia. He was in the Gulf. The Gulf states were telling him this, right? What happened after the Israelis attacked Qatar in that failed attempt to assassinate Hamas's leaders is that not just Qatar, but Saudi Arabia, the UAE get in and they say, look, if you don't do something about this, you're going to get a region which is going to be highly unstable, which is going to threaten to undermine not only your quest for a Nobel Peace Prize, but any type of political and military approach you want to take. And that was reinforced by a significant fact. And I just have to tell you this, that is that Qatar not only has the biggest American base in the world, Qatar also is the site of one of the Trump organization's big proposed projects, a $5.5 billion golf resort to be built there. And Qatar provided $1.5 billion of the money that bankrolled the investment firm of Donald Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, who happens to be one of the American negotiators involved in this agreement. So the Trump family had economic interest here, which meant they could turn on Netanyahu, apply pressure. And you're showing some clips of Netanyahu, both from Washington, but if you go back and see him today, he looks very uncomfortable.
Very.
Doesn't look happy. And there's a telling moment about that, and that is Trump being Trump. When he signs the deal, he gets all the cameras on him as he pulls out that black Sharpie he always carries. He scrawls on it. He holds up the signature like he does with all his executive orders. Netanyahu is just off to the side, and at times it looks like he's sucking lemons. He did not want this ceasefire, Petrie. I will tell you this. He didn't want it.
I was just going to come to that because this is actually a very dangerous political time for Benjamin Netanyahu. From everything that I've read, he needed to keep this fight going. He needed to keep this war on Hamas going for as long as possible to keep himself out of a courtroom, to keep himself in the position that he's in, because the very, very hard right in his government wanted him to continue doing that. He's now lost their support. He did not look happy today. I completely agree with you. He looked like a man just going, well, what now? Because his whole plan, as selfish and as crazy as it was, it seems to have been to keep him out of trouble.
Netanyahu needed to do one of two things. He either needed to get all the hostages and all the bodies back through the attacks on Hamas, and that wasn't succeeding after more than 2 years, or he needed to get into almost a perpetual conflict where you just keep doing this to defer any type of political, legal accountability. Now he's caught between those two options in that, okay, the hostages have come back, some of the bodies come back, but it looks like it was Trump that got them back and not Netanyahu. Yeah. It looks like he was pushed into it. And here I think is the risk as we go forward, Petrie, which I'm looking at, because those hard right ministers who voted against the ceasefire, who actually said, when we get the hostages back, we will resume the operations to destroy Hamas, they're still in Netanyahu's government. The two to watch are the finance minister, Bezalel Smotrich, and the internal security minister, Itamar Ben-Gvir. Now, Netanyahu is going to continue to have this thorn in his side, which is that if he appears to be going soft on Hamas in their view, they could bring the government down. They could come out of it. My concern is this, with all those vague areas that remain to be confirmed, and I would start with the disarmament of Hamas. that those ministers will use that as the pretext to say Hamas is not living up to the deal. We have to resume operations. And at that point, Netanyahu's got a choice. He either goes along with them and goes back on his mission to destroy Hamas, which is what he had set out to do, or he tries to hold out because he fears that Trump is still invested and Trump will be upset by this. But Petrie, if Donald Trump walks away after today, if he thinks this is it, he's taken the victory lap. He may not be that concerned. And I'm going to flash you back again to why I'm cautious, even as we should celebrate what has happened. You might remember in January, we had a 6-week ceasefire. That was phase one, like today is phase one. Some of the hostages were released then for detainees. That was supposed to lead to a phase two, then a phase three to release all of the hostages. Netanyahu and the hard right ministers made the decision at the start of March, we are not going into phase two of that ceasefire. We are going to resume the military operations. In fact, they intensified them, and we're going to cut off almost all aid, which led to starvation as well as the threat of mass killing from the air or on the ground. What did Donald Trump do at that point? Did he say, wait a minute, no, I'm invested in this ceasefire. I want a phase two ceasefire. I want this to proceed, you know? No. He said, Bibi, do what you have to do. And he said his solution would be for most of the Gazans to leave Gaza. Now, if we get back to this point, where Netanyahu does not want to proceed to the next phase of the ceasefire, and the ministers don't want to proceed to the next phase of the ceasefire, or if Hamas causes trouble and they don't want to proceed to the next phase of the ceasefire, is Trump still invested, or does he walk away like he did in March and just say, here you go, Bibi, here's your blank check?
Well, he believes this is done, and we know that Donald Trump gets bored, right? If this deal isn't it, then you're on your own. We've heard him say that before. But we're looking at a situation here, and again, I did watch all of his speech today, and I didn't hear two-state solution. I didn't hear anything that gave any hope to clearing the West Bank. Sorting out what's going to happen with the rebuild. I mean, he talked about lots of people are going to make lots of money, but he didn't say who they were rebuilding for. And I thought that was really telling. That we all know that a two-state solution is the only solution if it does have the backing of the Middle East, if it has the backing of Israel, and security can be put into place. Anything else is ethnic cleansing, and I thought it was disappointing that there wasn't more said. Look, Gaza's got to be for the Palestinians. The West Bank has got to be sorted out. And as all of that, we've been looking over to Gaza. The infiltration into the West Bank has been going at pace.
Oh, yeah. You should be in this chair, Petrie, because that's a great analysis. I mean, let's add to Gaza, because a lot of people have not actually, focused on the West Bank, like you've just said. And that is that, remember that, hundreds of Palestinians have been killed in the West Bank in these past 2 years, many of them in clashes with Israeli forces. You've had thousands who have been detained, some of whom were released today. But meantime, you've had the expansion of these illegal Israeli settlements across the West Bank to the point where the E1 project is threatening to split the West Bank. And indeed, it was only after September 9th, after that Israeli attack on Qatar, that the U.S. government came out and said to the Israeli government, stop talking about annexing the West Bank, which some of the ministers do. So that's a serious open issue that continues, as well as the open issues on Gaza. And you will not hear Trump say two-state solution. You won't hear his envoys say two-state solution. You won't hear Secretary of State Marco Rubio say it because they don't believe in it. They don't believe in a state of Palestine. And indeed, it's not just Israel, it's almost the U.S. that are now isolated. When you have 157 out of 193 countries in the world that do support that state, including in the last few months the UK, France, Canada, Australia, New Zealand. Now, what does that mean? Look, ever since the 1990s, And indeed, especially since 2009, when we had the last serious effort for an Israel-Palestine settlement, Benjamin Netanyahu has always based his approach on the idea of you don't need to talk about a state of Palestine. You can talk about economic development. Economic development, and they'll be happy with that. Here we are 16 years later, and what is Netanyahu, Trump, and others, what are they talking about? Oh, we'll just talk about economic development. But what form does that economic development take? For Trump, it doesn't take the form of economic development for those 2 million, almost 2 million Gazans that were displaced, many of whom who have lost their homes, who have lost hospitals, who have lost schools, who have lost basic necessities. His idea of economic development is resorts, condominiums, hotels, right? High-end stuff. So you're going to have this question in both the short term and in the long term. In the short term, getting beyond that PR episode in Egypt today, which was just awful for reasons I can further explain. Will you get the Gulf states, Turkey, European states, including the UK and others, to say, we have to have a serious focus on reconstruction and recovery beyond getting aid in there, which is a reconstruction of basic services, of basic utilities, of homes, of schools. Is that what you get? Or do you get this diversion, this swerve, which is basically Trump, Kushner, and others in Israel, which says when we talk about economic development, we talk about the fact that people can go in and make a profit by developing resort areas. You know, because the former is the way that you get to some type of stability as you talk about a two-state solution, both for Israelis to be secure and Palestinians to be secure. The latter is just simply going to stoke the seeds of further instability and heaven help us, possibly a further conflict.
Just briefly, if we can, looking at the governance. I mean, we've talked about having the security forces in there, where the governance of the region. Tony Blair's name was mentioned, which is not very popular, and even Donald Trump now said, "Oh, he's not as popular as I thought." So maybe Tony Blair won't be on that list. But we've also got a situation where 10% of the ordnance that was fired at the Palestinian people is unexploded, and more people will die as they sort through rubble, try to rebuild their homes, just by the ordnance that's been left there, and this is what, for me, creates that instability as well, because if you're still seeing people being killed in Gaza, then what kind of peace is that?
No, I mean, we've got an immediate issue, which is already there tonight, Petrie, which is because you've got a vacuum in terms of what security means. Hamas are on the streets.
Yeah.
Providing the so-called law enforcement. Now, if you want to spin that positively and you say, well, that's great. That means Hamas is providing security. If you want to be not so, positive about that, you say, look, the guys who were responsible for October 2023, they're the ones who are back there displaying themselves, and they are armed, right? So you have to talk about getting both governance and security soon, not later, soon. But that's when you run into another problem. I'll just give you two examples of that. First of all, when you talk about it at the top end, who's part of this day-to-day administration? The Israelis did not release amongst the detainees today a man named Marwan Barghouti. Now, why would that name be significant? He is a member of the Fatah party. He's not a member of Hamas. He's been in prison for more than 20 years. For many Palestinians, he's seen as a possible leader of a Palestinian government or a Palestinian state. You cannot underestimate that. That's why the Israelis didn't release him. They don't want a Palestinian of any profile who could be part of this move towards a state to come out. Well, that's going to affect who is involved in the administration, who is brought in at this point. Secondly, on the ground, you've got to remember that many of the Palestinians who were involved in civil defense in Gaza were killed, along with the more than almost 68,000 that were slain since October 2023. You've got to find personnel to go back into what you're talking about, which are civil defense roles, demining operations, basic operations in terms of unstable areas where you could have collapsing buildings and so on. It is not enough for the Americans to say, oh, we're going to put 200 troops in Israel, and they're going to supervise everything. You have got to have people in Gaza to do that. Now, we are being told Turkey, Qatar, UAE, Egypt will provide personnel. Let's see if that's true. But you've got to have Palestinians amongst them. Because what happens if you put in foreign personnel, even from an Arab state, with no local personnel to provide basic security? I don't want to say Iraq 2003, but you know exactly where I'm going with this.
Yeah.
They become targets rather than part of the solution.
I tell you, it's the first tiny step in a very precarious journey. Scott, always a delight to talk to you, though. Thank you very much indeed. Scott Lucas there, Professor of International Politics and founder and editor of EA Worldview.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, this is Talk, and just a reminder, we're going to be talking movies in a little while, and we're going to be talking about the new rules if you're going to the EU, because they confuse the heck out of me, I can tell you. But firstly, I have a question for you. Do I look younger? Do I look younger? Because apparently, training a dog can slow down women's ageing. I say it's the opposite. I think I've aged since I've been trying to train young Humphrey. I don't know why it's specifically women, but yes, apparently if you get a dog and you have to train it, the cells called telomeres, which shorten with aging. But if you train a dog, they don't shorten just as quickly. There you go. Researchers found striking evidence that dog training lengthened women's telomeres, suggesting a slowing down of ageing. The findings of the study on US veterans by experts at Florida Atlantic University indicate that dog training has promising biological effects. I don't believe a single word of this, because I know that trying to stop Humphrey from weeing on my duvet is definitely making me age, and changing my bed linen when I've been in bed for only half an hour, it also is making me age. But I'm not the expert. I'm just the poor sucker who got a puppy. But apparently if you want to look younger, train a dog.
DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, this is Talk and it's Petrie here with you. And coming up at midnight, don't forget, we have John Boothman joining us live from the SNP conference, which is obviously closed right now. But he's going to have all the latest from there and looking through the front pages for us. But first, let's turn our attention to movies. And Van Connor, our film critic, joins us now. Hello, Van.
Hello, Petrie. How are you doing, lovely?
I'm all right. How are you?
I'm good. It'd be better if I saw you more often.
Well,
obviously,
I know. I completely agree with you. I'd love to see you in person more often as well. Listen, tell me about these movies. Tron, is that Ares?
Ares, named for the god of war. As much as I don't want to have to talk about Tron Ares, I suppose we're going to have to. Tron Ares, which is the third of the Tron series. I'm a fan of the second. I'm a big fan of Tron Legacy. I'm a big fan of, a big $200 million Daft Punk music video that happens to be the coolest looking movie, like maybe of this century, in my opinion. We've got a third one. It has very little to do with the second, or does it? That's kind of the problem. So you've got a movie that has an entirely new roster of characters, features not one returning character. I know there's one returning cast member, but not one returning character from the series, yet for some reason keeps insisting on calling back to the previous two movies as if, the new incoming wave of Gen Z kids will remember stuff from a near 40-year-old sci-fi movie. But yeah, the idea here is that the Tron universe, which exists within a computer, where the circuits are like freeways kind of thing, and electrical circuits are light cycles and things like that is being brought into the real world by two dueling corporations who are basically in an arms race to see which of them can discover, and I swear to God I'm not making up the name of this, which one can discover the permanence code that allows these things to exist for more than 29 minutes without crumbling into dust. Along the way, there is also a security program called Ares, the most advanced AI security ever written, although for some reason they chose to personify it by making it look and sound like Jared Leto, because apparently consumer appeal wasn't a factor. So yeah, I've got a clip for you. This is Ares, as played by Jared Leto, being unveiled to a group of military contractors.
Ladies and gentlemen, I would like you to meet Ares. This is the most sophisticated security program ever written. You want to shake his hand? Go ahead. He doesn't bite. Ares has billions of lines of code unique to him. Is it alive? That depends on your definition, Stuart. Because unlike you, he's biblically strong, lightning fast, and supremely intelligent. He is fully proprietary and 100% expendable. Ares is the ultimate soldier. He needs no food, no water, sheds no blood. And if by some miracle he is struck down on the battlefield, I will simply make you another.
It's not exactly original, is it?
No, it's really not. The first 2/3 of this are like a really crap version of Starman. And then the third act is at once both a hodgepodge rehash of the first Tron and also the entire third act Pac-Man sequence from Pixels, which Pixels was already brain-numbingly insulting to audiences, so the idea that you'd want to rip that off in a Tron threequel is kind of mystifying to me. Unlike the last... But the thing is, you had the second one, which was effectively a millennial remake of Tron. The idea was this is a Lego sequel. It set the template for let's just remake the one from 30 years ago, and then if new audiences cotton onto this, we'll make the actual sequel. See also any of the Scream ones from the last decade, or those kind of ones. And the problem is that this director, who did this exact same shtick with the Pirates sequel that he directed, has simply taken that Lego sequel, that retread, that millennial remake, as if it's the template. It's like how every Terminator sequel after the second one is just a remake of the second one. No matter what they try, they just always wind up remaking the second one, give or take Salvation. And the problem is, Tron was never a particularly great movie to begin with. Like, the second one got by on the fact that it was just so cool. This one really wants to be cool. And you can tell that it's been put together by people who, again, are just like older people writing on a bulletin board, on a whiteboard, like, what do the kids think is cool now? Oh, 9 Inch Nails and Jared Leto. I don't know who thinks Jared Leto is cool. I will say, casting him as a soulless, dead-eyed AI might be the best casting anyone's ever come up for the man.
I have to be honest, Van, I may not surprise you, I've not seen any of the Tron movies.
I would maybe watch Legacy and can the rest, if I'm really honest.
All right, what about I Swear?
Exact opposite scenario. This one you must race out immediately and see, Petrie. If you like to laugh and you like to cry, I've got a movie for you, and it's called I Swear. So this is, you may know the documentary, actually, that this sort of comes from. The documentary was called John's Not Mad in 1989. It was about John Davidson, became an early spokesperson for Tourette's syndrome in the United Kingdom. Most of us in this country.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
There it is. Yeah.
Okay. This is the one that swore in front of the Queen? Is that right?
Yes. He did. He did, in fact, swear in front of the Queen, yes.
Yeah.
And that's how the movie opens. The movie opens with him getting his MBE in 2019 and then flashes back and shows us his life, how, when he was about 13, he was a confident, charismatic, handsome young man, had a potential, career as a goalkeeper ahead of him and loving father and all that stuff. And as he started to develop the tics and outbursts that would become diagnosed as, Tourette's syndrome down the way, because it wasn't known at the time. Everyone just thought he was making it up, hence the name of the documentary. His life would eventually unravel, and it's not until years later that he connects with an old school friend and his school friend's dying mum, played by Maxine Peake, that he finds someone that actually starts to give him a pathway to a life, that starts to actually find a way that he can live and function in the world and have a job, things like that, without his condition becoming that big obstacle. And along the way, he takes a job working for Peter Mullen, because, as I'm very fond of saying, a movie can only be so Scottish before Peter Mullen is obligated to appear. And this is very much one of those. So I've got a clip for you. This is Maxine Peake, who has just had dinner with this young man for the first time. He's played by Robert Aramayo. He's terrific in this. This is him washing the dishes after dinner.
You're going to visit us more often, which, I hope you are. I need to speak to you about your language.
Aye. Okay.
We have one rule in this house. And that's if you do anything you can't help, you never, ever have to apologise for it. If you're out in the street and, with people who don't understand you, then fine, apologise, whatever. But in this house, where we know you can't help it, where we know you don't mean it, well, it all means diddly squat. It's the apologise that drives me mad. You don't need to apologise. Okay?
Okay.
Was that the only bit you could find without him swearing?
It's been a nightmare finding clips for that this week. Yeah. It really has been an absolute nightmare. Not even kidding. I had so many issues with the BBC.
I was sitting here thinking, I know Van knows, but are we gonna? Is something gonna slip out? I mean, that does look superb.
I will say, I saw this, I think, about 5 weeks ago for the press show, and then it came out on Friday, and I went and saw it again that night. And on both occasions, I laughed at the same parts, I cried at the same parts, I was really swept away and emotionally carried by the same parts. It's a really terrific movie. It's got wonderful performances, particularly from Robert Aramayo and Maxine Peake, although Shirley Henderson as well, a Moaning Myrtle, I think, to an entire generation now, gets some real emotional heft in this one. It's got a sort of a Full Monty effect, where it is kind of a kitchen sink kind of an idea, a very British kitchen sink dramedy, but it has that emotional heft, but at the same time the hilarity that Full Monty did back in the way. And I would argue this is deeper and more meaningful on so many more levels. But Peter Mullen, though, oh God, I'll just watch anything Peter Mullen's in forever. He's wonderful. Everyone in this film is wonderful. The film is terrific.
I'll tell you that when we make movies like this, the Brits, I don't think there's anybody who can do it better, with that sort of, like you said, that real intense drama, but that stupid sense of humour that we've got as well. I will say clever
as well, I think he's getting a BAFTA nom for this. I think Robert Aramayo, shoe in. He may not win, but I think he will definitely get nominated.
Do you reckon? Do we know what else has he been in? Do we know him?
To be honest with you, I know him for being young Sean Bean in Game of Thrones when they do the flashbacks with baby Jon Snow. Like, that's where I know. Although apparently he's in that Lord of the Rings TV show that I couldn't be bothered to watch.
Oh, yeah, no, I couldn't be bothered to watch that.
Much like most of the TV viewing.
Because Sam just said he looks like Gavin from Gavin and Stacey.
I don't know. I think he's got a bit more charisma than that.
Let's talk about Bradley Cooper just quickly, because I want to get on to Diane Keaton. But Bradley Cooper is going to replace Ryan Gosling?
Yeah. So we got word about 2 years ago that we were getting an Ocean's 11 prequel that was going to be set in the 60s during the Monaco Grand Prix. It was going to star Margot Robbie and Ryan Gosling as the parents of George Clooney and Sandra Bullock, and they would be like doing their own heist con kind of shtick. And now Gosling has dropped out, and Bradley Cooper apparently is just really good mates with Margot Robbie, and they just wanted to do a movie together for a few years. So she just slotted him in. So I'm sure he's just, adding zeros to his demands right now.
Yeah, and Gosling's
obviously
walked away from it because he doesn't think it's good enough.
I doubt that somehow, and I also think Gosling and Margot Robbie in another movie only 2 years after Barbie, that would have made bank just for that. But also a bit weird. But anyway, I like Bradley Cooper. I think he's good.
Diane Keaton.
Oh, Diane.
Diane. It's interesting because Gabrielle and I were talking before this. My producer and I were talking before the show, and saying that she really seemed to open the door for that sort of older woman over the age of 20 in Hollywood, actually getting in there and doing really good chunky stuff. But also she never played the Hollywood game in terms of aging or any of that nonsense. She just was uniquely herself.
She was a legend in so many ways, and I grew up with the Father of the Bride remake is an essential text in my family's house, and there are so many great Woody Allen movies that she did, and First Wives Club, and and then you get to the comedies that she made this century. She kind of popularized I think what they call the Grey Pound comedy now, which is the sort of the sunset comedies. That's what Paul Ross calls it, the sunset comedies, which are these sort of rom-coms for older audiences. So you have things like Something's Gotta Give, where, and she would have love interests who were sort of age appropriate, who were like Alec Baldwin and Steve Martin. And the age factor was never really a barrier. It was just about the fact they were all really charismatic performers. And at the center of it all was Diane Keaton with that poise, that body language, that very specific kind of performance, and of course the style. Because no one had the style of Diane Keaton. She was a very singularly stylish woman.
Yeah.
In a very unique way. But she'll be very fondly missed. I can't imagine what, movies... I can't imagine going, a year without seeing Diane Keaton in a movie. That's
she just was just so... I think she just had funny bones as well. You could just look at her and she made you smile, right? She just was fantastic. And she was 79... Was she not?
She was.
Yeah.
She didn't look it or have the energy of a 79-year-old at all. I would have thought she was 20 years younger.
No, a real tragedy. But I love the last photograph that was ever taken of her grinning at her dog. So she's all right with me.
The dog or Martin Short?
It definitely was a dog. It wasn't Martin Short. Van Connor, it's lovely to see you. You take care. And I'll see you very, very soon. Van Connor there, our film critic. about Labour, because Scotland is a natural Labour voter, so I always consider that. But now Labour has seems to have crashed mid-flight, or even just at on the takeoff, actually. The SNP do stand more of a chance. But where is reform in Scotland?
Well, this is where the situation gets really interesting, because actually, in reality, the intervention of reform, since reform wins more votes from other unionist parties, that is Labour and the Conservatives, ironically, as a result of that, it benefits the SNP, because basically the reform vote means that Labour can't win seats from the SNP that otherwise they might have had a chance to win. They can stop the Tories in the seats that the Tories hold by basically dissipating their vote, meaning that the SNP might take some Tory seats. So the great irony of this, of course, is that Nigel Farage's intervention in Scotland might mean that the SNP have another period in power. And if you look at the opinion polls in Scotland at the moment, the SNP, as I said already, is running at about 35% of the vote. Labour is running at about 20%. Reform's not very far behind them at about 20%, and the Tories and the Liberal Democrats are running probably about something between 10, 12%, maybe 15%.
But what if Labour hinted at a potential indie ref too?
Well, the problem for Labour is that people had, so as you rightly said yourself, such high expectations of Labour that the disaster that's been Keir Starmer basically has left Labour in a position where they are kind of hemorrhaging support all over the place. And the fact of the matter is that if we were sitting here actually probably a year ago, before Labour started to get into the deep trouble that it's been in, it looked as if Labour were laughing all the way to the bank. The SNP really can't believe their luck, right? Because support for the SNP is down on where it was, but
to be the least worst option.
Yeah.
I don't suppose you care if you get back into power, do you? John, let's take a quick break before we take a look at the UK papers.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, this is Talk and it's Petrie here with you until 1 o'clock, and with me, John Boothman, political correspondent at the Sunday Times in Scotland. John, it's going to be a very brief paper review, I think, because every single paper is carrying pretty much just the one story, because it is just the one story. The Sun, freed from hell, 20 Israeli hostages home at last, with a photograph of all of them. And it's interesting to note that these are all young men, because I presume that the older men and the women have been released on earlier occasions.
Yeah, or maybe passed away in some cases,
Yeah.
I think.
We know there's 24 bodies missing, don't we?
Yeah, we do. Basically, as I say, 28 bodies they thought they were going to receive, and they've only received 4, which has caused a bit of anguish in Israel itself. I mean, I think, you know, one of the things that's probably worth reflecting on just right at the beginning is just to look at what's happened in the 738 days it's been since this conflict started. I think 68,000 Palestinians dead, 1,983 Israelis dead. The West Bank seen thousands of houses destroyed, people lifted, as we would say in Scotland. It was a conflict in really just over 2 years that's involved Israel, Qatar, the Lebanon, the Yemen, Syria, Iran. There's been starvation. Cities and towns have been literally obliterated. And I was reading a figure which astounded me, which said the ordnance that had been dropped in Gaza amounted to 13 times the force of Hiroshima. And yet the amazing thing about it is, here we've had a situation where literally one man, Donald Trump, who we've spent an awful long time over the past few months denigrating, or certainly being looking slightly awry at some of his actions, in the space, well, I think since September the 8th, because he was so angry at what happened in that Israeli bombing of Qatar, has managed to bring about a ceasefire. I mean,
well, I think he bullied Netanyahu into it, because Benjamin, there's nothing in this for Benjamin Netanyahu personally.
Well, I mean, that, you know, one of the most astonishing things in the White House, on the 30th of September, I think it was, that they sat in the White House and Trump made Netanyahu speak to the ruler of Qatar and apologise on the phone for attacking Hamas officials there. And any of the papers that I'm reading today are telling me that indeed was the catalyst, that incident, for Trump, you know, really starting to push for a ceasefire. Look, it's early days yet, and we all hope that this will continue. This is only phase 1. Phase 2, we hope, can start soon with a whole series of things. The demilitarization of Gaza. Let's hope that these things can begin. Fragile, I suspect.
Well, we've been here before, haven't we, with a ceasefire, waiting for phase 2, and it didn't happen. This does feel a bit different. I think that you know, even in the speech today, Trump did say, with a joke, to Netanyahu, look, you were becoming really unpopular, and this had to end. But it is really interesting to me, and I mentioned this earlier on in the programme to Scott Lucas, is that there's been no mention by Trump of a two-state solution. None of them have mentioned that specifically, and you would hope that they would. And there's no mention of withdrawing from the West Bank either. This has all been about Gaza. This has all been looking to the left and not to the right. Right? It's look over there. There's been no mention of the West Bank and the settlements that have been growing there. Like you said, the people who've been lifted off the streets, put in prisons. You know, that is a a huge part of this that nobody is talking about, and that makes me really nervous.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, for me, looking at the coverage that I've seen today, you know, I was travelling a lot today, there was certainly some coverage of, you know, the release of Palestinian prisoners. You know, some of these Palestinian prisoners have been in jail for more than 2 decades. Some of them there in jail for 2 decades without charge.
Yeah.
There's what I think 100 and odd of them have been exiled altogether out of Egypt. I saw a woman I think on Sky News just before I came on, waiting on her brother to come back, I think to the West Bank, only to discover that he wasn't coming back. And he won't be coming back either, because he was on a list of people that the Israelis didn't want to come back.
Yeah.
And the conditions that these people have been living in have been pretty poor. You know, look, you know, we can't, you know, but not say how obviously terrible the situation's been for the hostages. You know, that picture in the Sun, I think, is very, very, very powerful, of the 20 who've been returned. You know, and at least a few that I saw, you know, in obviously emaciated and in, you know, a terrible physical state. And never mind the mental damage that all of these people must be suffering. But yeah, I think, you know, look, this for me doesn't get solved as, you know, to get to a situation of peace in the region without solving the issue of the Palestinians. That would certainly be my view, and I just hope we don't end up in a place where we're back there again. And again, you're right, you know, Netanyahu himself has specifically said there won't be a state for the Palestinians. But, you know, there's at least some hope when there was no hope before.
I agree, and there's more pressure on Netanyahu this time, and who knows what the secret talks are behind the scenes, right? So, you know, you could stand to make a lot of money. You know, all of those deals will be being done. But I just thought it was really so evident today with Trump's speech that there was no mention. It's almost like, right, that's it, peace after 3,000 years, it's all done. And it's kind of like, there can be no sustainable peace without a solution. And there isn't a solution, right? There doesn't seem to be a real plan that includes the Palestinians.
It's still all at a very aspirational level, right?
Yeah.
And actually, to be fair, I think that it's people in our neck of the woods in the UK, more particularly in Europe, who are in a place where they would be more than happy to see the eventual outcome as a two-state solution. Yeah. I'm not sure that...
I can't think what else there could be.
Well, I'm not sure that Trump and the people round about Trump think that way, you know, for all the reasons and the closeness that we've seen before. I mean, these were pretty amazing scenes in the Knesset today, to see Netanyahu saying that Trump was the greatest friend that Israel had ever had in the White House. You know, pretty amazing scenes at Sharm el-Sheikh as well, as everybody had to hang around and wait for him. But you know, as I say, we've been very fond of not giving credit to Trump for a variety of things over the past period. He certainly deserves some credit.
Credit where it's due.
In relation to this.
Credit where it's due. I just hope that there's not a lot of hope over expectation, if you know what I mean.
Sure,
I mean,
sure.
You know, just to tread carefully. And it's interesting that Keir Starmer, of course, has volunteered Britain, it seems, to be part of the disarming of Hamas because of our experience with the IRA in Northern Ireland. That seems to be the reason for it.
I noticed that the National Security Advisor, Jonathan Powell, of course the ex-aide of Tony Blair, was around with Starmer today. in Sharm el-Sheikh, and he specifically had been singled out, I think, by Witkoff for the part that he had played in relation to, you know, getting to where they've got now. My recollection is that, you know, in terms of that decommissioning process with the provisional IRA after the Good Friday Agreement, and I think it took, you know, a good number of years for that to actually be finalised.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure that's where Trump is in relation to Hamas. They don't have a number of years, I would have thought. But that Jonathan Powell had played some role round about, you know, the 20-point plan that had been announced, and, you know, was at least getting some credit in relation to that.
Yeah, and as for Hamas, again, I was reading something a little bit earlier. The suggestion being that the fighters, the Hamas fighters, would only hand their weapons over to a Palestinian organisation of some kind, and then would be absorbed into the Palestinian military. I'm not sure that would be an accepted term.
I suspect we're in the foothills of all of this. I think, you know, you've got a headline agreement and a 20-point plan, and underneath that there's a whole series of detail needs to be worked out. I mean, I saw some suggestion that if people handed in their weapons and were disbanded, that as individuals they might be able to move forward and join something that was set up. But look, you know, there's a bit of water to go under the bridge. And I think one of the worries that, you know, people in the region have about it, politicians in the region have about all this, is that it's great that Trump's engaged in it, it's great that Trump's done what he has done, but that he loses a bit of patience, right, and he loses a bit of interest in the whole thing. And if that happens, and that he being the linchpin of all of it, then that the whole thing might yet fall apart.
Yeah, I think that was my concern, is that he seems to believe that it is done. And we all know in this region there's really no such thing. And there's a lot to go. And I just hope that, because he was saying it, that they asked me to be part of this governing body. I'm a very busy man, so he didn't confirm or deny that he was going to be part of it. But if he does lose interest in it, and we've heard him say before, either you accept this or we're done, America's done. He said it a couple of times over Ukraine and Russia. Hasn't so far acted on that, but we do know that he gets impatient. He thinks, right, I've done this now, time to move on. And I'm not taking anything away from him. I think the fact that he's got anybody this far is extraordinary, and like I said, credit where it's due. I'm just concerned that this is not done. This is the first step. This was the easiest step, and this was hard enough.
Yeah, and again, you know, any single incident in any single part of what is, you know, a very volatile area, a fragile sort of, you know, piece in an area where there's, you know, blurred lines that divide where the IDF are. And as we've said already, everything that has been happening over the West Bank in the past few months, incidents even in Jerusalem, you know, it's a tinderbox. And the smallest incident could kick off a whole series of things. The other bit, of course, is that, you know, there's not been any speculation yet about what happens with Netanyahu and his government. You know, we've already heard, you know, those people in the far right in the Israeli government, if that's the right terminology to use. I hope
I've just written that down, actually. I was going to use the same. So talk to you about that.
And some people will no doubt be offended by that. You know, they've said that, you know, that if the bits of this peace agreement go ahead, that they might withdraw from the government, meaning an election. And that could be something that triggers off, a whole different situation in Israel itself. I mean, I don't like to hark back to these things, but there's been a time in the past where things in terms of a drive for peace in the region were going pretty well. And you will recall, and I can certainly recall, it all fell apart after Yitzhak Rabin was shot by an Israeli, not by a Palestinian, and all of the efforts then came to naught.
Yeah, it is a really tricky time, and it is exacerbated and it is made more difficult by those people on the very far right of Benjamin Netanyahu, who have said to him, you cannot stop until Hamas is completely eradicated. And he's had their support. And if there is an election, which without war, eventually there will have to be, Netanyahu stands to lose not just his position but his liberty as well. So that you've got to remember that as well, John. It all plays into this really uncertain time. But let's take a quick break, and we'll come back in just a moment.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, this is Talk, and it's Petrie here with you, and with me, John Boothman, political correspondent at the Sunday Times in Scotland. I'm going to rattle through a few front pages here, John, because they're all pretty much alike. The Times, 2 years of torment over as hostages reunited with families. Some great photographs there as well. The Mirror, Gaza ceasefire deal signed. Day we thought we'd never see, an outpouring of emotion as Israeli hostages and Palestinian prisoners are freed. That's the Daily Mirror. The Independent, hostages freed at last as Trump basks in praise. The Guardian, truce brings joy as Israelis and Palestinians are freed. Some amazing photographs with all of these front pages. The I paper, we did not give up hope. We did not lose faith. We did not lose hope. Again, referring to the hostages there. The Daily Star, even going with that. The hug of love. Last 20 Gaza hostages home, and there's a picture there of the twins. Hostage twins are reunited. The Daily Express, the long, painful nightmare is over, again reflecting those hostages coming home. And the Daily Mail as well, Noah's hero is home. Rescued Israeli hostage Noah Armani's reunion with her freed boyfriend was sealed with a kiss. And the Metro as well, home and now it's time for peace. Even the FT, Trump declares historic dawn after final 20 living Israeli hostages are freed. And John, just to pick up on that point of the living hostages, we said there were 28 bodies supposed to be returned. Only 4 were, but Hamas has got a problem, because they don't know where the other 24 are, because some of the people that had hidden them or put them somewhere have themselves been killed. So this could take quite some time, with all the tunnels, with all the destruction. This could actually take years to find these people.
And also, some of these people would no doubt have perished at the hands of Israeli bombardment.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. This is going to be a difficult situation and cause a lot of grief and a lot of angst for people. The other small group of people it's probably worth mentioning, and again this plays into what we were saying just before the break about, you know, a search for peace and a two-state solution, is some of the prisoners who haven't been released on the Palestinian side, most notably Marwan Barghouti, who is regarded by many people, supporters of the Palestinians, as a Nelson Mandela-like figure.
He's too popular.
Former Fatah leader. Anytime there's opinion polls among Palestinians, he comes out as the guy who is the top choice that people would like to see as a leader of the Palestinians. There was an opportunity here for him to be released. He was convicted 2 decades ago, I think, of being involved in terrorist attacks and of murder by the Israelis, though that, I think, is disputed by not least his supporters. But again, you're back into this very difficult situation that you think if there was a true intent of getting something sorted, then maybe it would have been a good idea to release this particular individual.
Yeah, the concern would be, I guess, that he could rally the Palestinians behind him, and therefore he would have to be part of the peace body, or whatever it's called, going forward. So it's an interesting point. So that's pretty much all of the front pages. The Daily Telegraph again, Trump saying let's end Ukraine war. And one thing that I did find interesting when I was reading everything today was that Trump has said, it's a bit of a side because it's been overshadowed, but he's mentioned about selling to NATO to give to Ukraine some very high-powered missiles, long-distance missiles. So he's saying he's giving them to Ukraine. We know that that's not the case. We know he's selling them to NATO because he doesn't give anything away. But that could pivot the Ukrainian defence, couldn't it? If they've got those weapons.
Basically suggesting that by giving them Tomahawk missiles, they can target energy sources far inside Russia.
Well, they could target the Kremlin inside, right? I mean, you know, this is the thing, is that suddenly it seems that the gloves could be off.
Yeah, and again, the timing of all this is interesting because, you know, that's us, and you can see it. I can see it here where I am. We're now starting to get into, you know, the different weather and the different terrain. And if you're going to start targeting, for example, power stations and the like in Russia and in the Ukraine, you know, that's going to cause, again, an awful lot of grief and a lot of damage, right, to both, you know, individuals and to the economy.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, but it is interesting that the same way, really, as Trump pivoted with Israel to the point where he seemed to lose patience once Qatar had been bombed, it feels like the same narrative now that Trump is using against Russia. I mean, Putin has embarrassed Trump. Let's be honest about it. This so-called buddy-buddy friendship, I think the scales are falling from Donald Trump's eyes with Putin. And it's just interesting to me that it's the same right, I've had enough now, and giving Ukraine what they've needed all along, frankly, is the weapons with which to not only defend themselves, but to attack the enemy.
And observing Donald Trump, he'll think he's on a bit of a roll, having done
that's what I think.
Done, in the Middle East. He thinks that he'll be able to solve this as well. And of course, that so far elusive Nobel Peace Prize, he can see, that'll be the next thing that he wants to hang in his wall in the Oval Office.
Yeah, and he could look, if this peace deal holds. But it was interesting to read the Nobel decision because, frankly, Trump was never going to win it because it was closed 4 days into him coming into power, right? So he hadn't ended the 8 wars that he claims to have ended by then. So he was never in the running, right? He was never in the running for this. But when they said who they chose, and they were saying, look, this is about spreading democracy. This is about spreading, and the words were very carefully chosen, which to me read, we're not convinced by what Trump is doing at home. So if you want to win the new Nobel Peace Prize, it really doesn't matter how many wars you end in other parts of the world if you're creating an unstable one in the US. And that's the way I read. I don't know if you read much of that, but I read quite a lot of the decisions. And it was very pointed, I thought, towards, squashing dictators and not, and taking care of democracy, which was, of course, Nobel's entire purpose.
It's early days yet. Let's see where we get to by the time we are, this time next year.
Yeah.
But, these things are difficult. But as you say, if we end up in a situation where the Middle East peace holds, that there's some advancement from where we are now, at least an end to some destruction.
Yeah.
And if they can make some progress on the Ukrainian front, then, he must be a contender.
He's got to be. He's got to be a contender. If it holds, he's got to be a contender. Yeah. But it was just interesting to me how they worded why they chose the woman that they chose. And that was about, not seeking glory, but paving the way for democracy. And it was just a little, ouch, a moment there. Before we go to the break, targeted prostate screening. Now, there's been some talk about cancelling this, which I think is a really bad idea. But they're saying that prostate screening could save thousands of lives for £18 a head. And also, it can save the NHS hundreds of millions of pounds if men get checked and they're caught early. It's an easy fix. I don't know why anyone would want to cancel this screening programme.
I think the suggestion that I've read is that there's an awful lot of false positives with these PSA tests, which then sets people down the road of getting treatment that they don't particularly require. And because of that, that seems to be the reason that the NHS wouldn't want to roll out what would be, in effect, a targeted programme for 50 to 60-year-olds. The other group of people, males, the other group of people who would get targeted with any campaign are black men, where I think the incidence of prostate cancer is 4 times higher than in the general population. I don't know why that is, but these PSA tests are cheap. It's the early hours of the morning. That idea of, the doctor coming along and sticking his finger up your bum, that seems to be something that they don't need to do anymore, and you just get a simple test.
And that saves the embarrassment, that saves all of those things, and more men going forward. I think a false positive is better than, a false negative, right? Or whatever. If it means you get treatment you don't need, it's better than not getting treatment that you do need.
I would argue that. I think that's fair. But
I think that's fair.
That's the argument that I've heard.
Yeah. Let's take a break and we'll come back. We've got some extra stories we're going to discuss next.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, and a very good morning to you. This is Talk, and it is Petrie here with you until the top of the hour. And with me, John Boothman, political correspondent at the Sunday Times in Scotland. I should just call you our Scottish anorak, shouldn't I, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, that would do.
I'll wear it the next day.
And we love you for it, John. We love you for it. And now there's a story here that you've picked out, a particularly Scottish story here about a Scottish pub scrapping Harry Potter's Halloween night. Now, nothing to me seems less offensive, really, than a lot of people walking around with a wand.
I mean, this falls into the category of the world has gone mad, right, for me, right? Let me explain a bit about this pub, right? The pub that we're talking about here is Scotland's most remote pub.
Right.
It's in Knoydart, right, which is away up in the northwest of Scotland. If you want to go there, you have to get a train to Mallaig, right, which is away in the West Highlands. You then have to take a 30-minute ferry trip for 7 miles, right, effectively across the sea. Once you get to the end of that journey and you get back onto land, you have an 18-mile hike, right, because there's no roads before you can get to this pub. It truly is, right? It's like it takes you a couple of days to get there.
You've got to be
right?
quite determined, or quite thirsty, or quite determined.
The bar management said the staff had, it says here, suffered grief due to the theme chosen by bosses. Who's given? I mean, so that presumably means they're getting grief in social media or something. You know, there's not going to be people turning up in the door of the pub, right, saying, you know, this is outrageous and it's an offensive against the trans community that you're having a Harry Potter themed night. It's just, the world's gone mad, right?
I mean, like, truly, because like you said, this is people being offended who aren't even going to be there. Who, I mean, this is all about the J.K. Rowling stance on what a woman is, right?
Yeah.
And she's very public about that. But they were going to charge 50 quid a head, which is a lot. I mean, who goes to this pub? I mean, how many locals are there?
There aren't any locals, hardly, right? I mean, basically the people who go to these pubs, you go there as a bit of an adventure, right?
Okay.
And people who are hikers, people who, you know, want to go and spend, you know, some time in the wilderness.
I mean, who's hiking on October the 31st?
Well, it's an incredible part of the country, right, to be honest.
Beautiful.
It's a you know, remote part of the country. I just think it's a completely crazy story, right, that they would organise a night like this and then cancel it on the basis of, you know, as I say, there's a wee bit at the end in the story. It says, we thought it was clear how we feel about...
Oh, I love this bit.
Right, especially given our recent support of the amazing Knoydart Pride celebrations. We had also planned a charity collection for trans youth on the night. So they've got a side, which then leads you, right, to think, why did they then arrange to have this theme in the first place?
But it's interesting to me, but I just want to know what the Knoydart Pride celebrations look like.
Well, there wouldn't be many there, put it that way.
No, I mean, it's extraordinary. But yeah, you're right. I mean, it is people being offended from a long way away who've got no intention of being there, and they've lost all that money as well. Talking about being a long way away, this is a really great story here. NATO chief mocks limping Russian submarine. Now, this was the Novorossiysk, part of the Russia's Black Sea Fleet, which was surfaced somewhere in the Channel. Which is a bit weird, but it surfaced somewhere in the Channel after a reported fuel leak. And Mark Rutte has said the vessel being towed home must have been on the hunt for a mechanic. So taking the mick out of Moscow.
Well, and actually, sorry, I think it jumped out at me was, I presume when he said the hunt for a mechanic, that was a play on the film The Hunt for Red October.
Oh yeah, of course. I hadn't thought of that.
So,
yeah.
so it's quite funny that there's well, how do you. There must be some kind of ship or whatever towing this stricken poor old submarine, off the coast of Britain back to wherever it needs to go.
Yeah, I mean, it surfaced in the English Channel, and in late September, reports of a fuel leak on a Russia. So it's limped somehow to the Channel, maybe hoping to sort of get through that and head to Kaliningrad. I don't know. That seems like a long way round, but it's a little bit embarrassing for Putin,
yes.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
It's not good. Other stories that we're looking at here. Eurovision organisers postpone vote on Israel's inclusion in the contest next year. I thought Eurovision wasn't political, John.
Well, I didn't think Israel was in Europe anyway, but that's another matter.
Neither is Australia, but that's in the Eurovision Song Contest.
Didn't see me. Again, look, I think there's a lot of double standards around some of this stuff, right? And, this might be a bit controversial, but it seems to me that both Eurovision and the football authorities who've been engaged in discussions about this on the back of the Gaza conflict seem to adopt one stance in relation to Israel and another stance in relation to Russia.
Yeah.
And there's a bit of kind of mixed messages going on here.
I agree.
I'm not saying I know what the solution is, but if you're going to go down this road, I think that there is some merit in going down these kind of roads on some occasions. I think, what happened in relation to apartheid in South Africa was something. Boycotting sporting events actually played some part in change there. I need to think a bit more about the Russian thing, and in particular, obviously, about the Israelis in Gaza. But my point would be, you should be consistent about these things, and I don't think these authorities are being consistent.
Yeah, neither do I. But it's interesting to me. They say, it's not political, and yet as soon as Brexit happened, we were getting nul point. So it was anything but.
No, it was because the songs we put in were pretty rubbish.
Well, yeah, I mean that is fairly accurate as well. I just wanted to say this is one of the stories that I found here. This is the way where my mind goes after a serious day of news. A feathered fiend. You haven't got this in front of you. This is in the Daily Star from Monday. A parrot has taken to repeating Hollywood star Liam Neeson's classic film Death Threat. This is Coco, an African grey parrot, loves calling out, "I'll find you and I'll kill you." That is a parrot you want, isn't it?
Yeah, well, that would be quite good, and no doubt if they try and silence it, they'll come back and say, "I'll be back."
I'll be back. I think I love what parrots choose and to say. But anyway, the parrot fan, a guy called August Johnson, said she picked it up from me. Who is he threatening to find and kill?
Well, indeed, right. That's a household you don't want to get.
Yeah,
it's worth mentioning, right, because this is a first as well. Every week we come on here and we talk about the Daily Star and the other worldly stories that they have. I think the story in the front page about the Israeli hostages that they have about the twins, those 28-year-old twins being released, is a great story. And to